Well, it's advantage Roosters in the minor premiership race, but do not sleep on the Wars. They're right there in the contest now, too. Penrith have surrendered top spot. The Warriors have forced their way into the conversation, while Cronulla's top four canoe has sprung another leak. The Dolphins have done something at Brookvale no visiting side could manage in 33 years. South Sydney may have landed a killer blow over the Dogs, while Newcastle just kept overcoming injuries and finding ways to bank another win. While Brisbane's horror premiership defence managed to get even worse, with Reece Walsh now joining the casualty ward. While in the NRLW, it was 6 straight for the Titans. Parramatta finally breaking their duck. The Tigers' fairy tale from wooden spooners to potential finalists keeps on rolling, and the Roosters blow Brisbane away late in the grand final rematch. Welcome back to our full breakdown, recap, and takeaways from round 24 of the NRL. 3 rounds remain, and both ends of the ladder are getting fascinating. The minor premiership race has changed. The top 4 battle has tightened. The fight around 8th, well, it's still in the mix. And somehow even the wooden spoon isn't quite decided yet. We'll work through every NRL game, the key injuries, the judiciary takeaways and issues before finishing off with a recap of round 7 of the NRLW. Before we jump in, make sure to jump into the comments and let us know who does take out the minor premiership from here. Will it be the Roosters? Will it be the Panthers? Or are the Wars generally in this? And which side around that finals bubble do you have missing out on September football? Let us know below. Make sure to hit like. And, of course, if you love your rugby league content, press the subscribe button as well. Let's start back on Thursday night where the Panthers 6, the Roosters 12. This was proper finals football. Low-scoring, physical, huge defensive stands, and potentially the most important 2 competition points of the season. Penrith, well, they threw plenty at the Roosters. They had repeated early sets, camped on the Roosters' line, and simply couldn't crack them. The Bondi Wall is well and truly back. Daly Cherry Evans scored both the Roosters' tries in another massive performance, just ahead of announcing that he was going to head to Hull FC next season. The Panthers, they eventually dragged themselves back to within 2 at 8-6 through Moses Leota. When the match was there to be decided, DCE came up clutch again. His late try sealed the victory and gave the Roosters the inside run to the minor premiership title. And remember, they did this with no James Tedesco, no Angus Crichton, and no Daniel Tupou. But the one thing we need to talk about is the late DCE Dylan Edwards bunker incident. Edwards was adjudged to have taken the ball dead with Cherry Evans chasing through. The bunker reviews whether DCE touched the football. For mine, the side-on angle shows clear knock-on from Daly Cherry Evans. The front-on angle is inconclusive at best. But there was enough there for them to make the judgment around it. It should have been fairly clear-cut. Despite reviewing it, the bunker rules no touch. Penrith are denied a 20-metre restart. In a game separated by 1 score, these sorts of things are enormous. Whether Penrith actually go down the other end and score is impossible to know, and you have to take your hat off the Roosters because they played the whistle and got it done. The decision itself, the bunker got it wrong, glaringly wrong, and I don't see any way of arguing that. On the Panthers, well, they look noticeably different without Isaiah Yeo, it's fair to say. Their connection through the middle wasn't there. Nathan Cleary had fewer of those second phase attacking opportunities that are normally created through Isaiah. But the positive news for Panthers fans is that he's avoided season-ending injury and surgery. He could potentially return during the finals. But until he does, Panthers look considerably more vulnerable than they did a few weeks ago, I think it's fair to say. In terms of judiciary, watch out of this one. Victor Radley and Freddie Lussick both get fines. Victor for a careless high tackle, Freddie for dangerous contact. But the takeaway from this one, it is advantage Roosters. They were short-handed, they defended like a premiership side, and they beat the benchmark to make themselves the benchmark. And right now, the road to the minor premiership runs dead smack bang through Bondi. We move on to the early game on Friday and a shutout at Brookvale. The Dolphins getting it done 22-0. It wasn't an explosive Dolphins performance, especially early. The opening half was pretty scrappy. Manly had football, Manly had field position, but they couldn't score. The Dolphins led 8-0 at halftime before gradually squeezing the life out of the contest. Selwyn Cobbo continued his strong form. Jack Bostock found the line. Jermaine Asako kept accumulating points. Jeremy Marshall-King got through an enormous defensive workload, and by full time, the Dolphins had done something that no visiting side had done at Brookvale in 33 years to hold Manly scoreless. 22-0 for the first time since 1993. Manly's 6th consecutive defeat. Their finals hopes are now done. The wheels are officially off the Fosball wagon, but this was about the Dolphins. It was important for them. This wasn't about running the cleaners through and putting 50 on someone. It was about getting a job done when the going got tough. They remain right in that top 4 conversation. Cronulla subsequently losing makes the result even more valuable, and they aren't simply just chasing their first finals appearance anymore. They are chasing a double chance and that top 4 lifeline. In terms of injuries, Connolly Lemuelu suffered a hamstring issue during the second half. He also faces a fine for dangerous contact. So we'll see how that all washes out. The takeaways, it was a slow start, but the Dolphins, even when it got challenging, found a way to win. 22-0 at Brookvale is no mean feat. They remain absolutely alive in this top four race. Manly, on the other hand, well, as I said, the wheels are off Fosball, and it's a bit of a disappointing damp squib to end the season, it looks like. Bulldogs 6, Rabbitohs 22. It looked like South Sydney had landed the killer blow to determine the makeup of the top 8 on Friday night. It felt absolutely enormous for the Dogs. They desperately needed the competition points. Instead, South Sydney controlled almost the entire game. They led 10-0 at halftime. They pushed that lead out to 18-0. Campbell Graham made a successful return and immediately found the try line. Matt Duffy was outstanding at the back. 2 line breaks, more than 300 running metres and a try. Cameron Murray churned through a mountain of defensive work and just did it with his normal underrated aplomb. David Fafita provided punch, in the battle between he and Kickow and Crichton was well worth the price of admission. Every time Canterbury looked ready to build some pressure, Souths found another way to scramble. The Dogs finally got on the board through Inari Tuala, but it was a little too late at that point, and Duffy slammed the door shut with the last try. At full time, this looked like a potentially fatal result for the Dogs, but then Parramatta knocking off North Queensland on Saturday, which we'll get to, keeps the Dogs alive. They do remain alive, but they're now heavily reliant on both their own results and some sides continuing to stumble. They can't afford any more slips themselves. In terms of injuries, South Sydney lost Adam Elliott early with a groin injury, while Canterbury lost Jethro Rinakama with a knee complaint. Souths take another big step towards September and stamping their spot there, while Canterbury may have just copped a killer blow. But Parramatta, well, they reached over and gave them just enough oxygen to keep on going. We move to Saturday, the Sharks 20, the Raiders 24, and there's another hole in Cronulla's top 4 canoe. 1 week after losing to the bottom place Dragons, Cronulla dropped another match they would have expected to win against a visiting Raiders side with nothing to play for. But this one, it knocks them out of the top 4. Braden Trindle opened the scoring, but in grounding the football, he dislocated his shoulder. His afternoon was over, and suddenly Cronulla's matchday squad construction became a massive talking point. I was on the hill for this one with a bunch of Cronulla fans, and we're sitting there talking about how do they restructure the team, and there was no obvious person to step into the halves. Nico Hines was left to carry almost all of the creative responsibility. They did fight back. They got themselves in front 20-18, but then Joe Tarpanay powered through 5 defenders to regain the lead for the Raiders. And the Sharks, well, look, they had plenty of late attacking football, but they just couldn't find the play and the punch required to win it. Where was the spine cover is the big question if you're a Sharks fan. It's the element that really stood out. You have an expanded bench available to you in 2026 with 6 players, yet no genuine specialist halves or spine replacement capable of immediately taking over Trindle's role. They didn't even have someone to really push to fullback that would have allowed someone like Will Kennedy to play into the halves. You can't prepare for every possibility and every possible injury, but if Hines and Trindle are the engine room of your attack, surely some genuine spine versatility has to exist somewhere in that matchday group. And when you look at who they had in the centres with Hiroti and Iro, who they had on the bench as well, Hahapapuru can come on and play a really good 9. Brayley, is he a 6? Probably not really. In terms of defending there, not a problem. In terms of attacking there, we've got a different question. And so it's so much fell to Nico Hines. It's something they're going to have to revisit as they head to September, but we'll wait and see what happens with Team List Tuesday this week. The good news for Sharks fan is the shoulder dislocation was confirmed. The positive news is he's avoided surgery. Cronulla hope to get him back at some point this season, but every week without him is a hugely important one while they fight for the double chance. Jesse Ramian already gone for the season with his pec injury. These blows are starting to come quicker and quicker for the Sharks. Well, one loss could have been called the loss Cronulla needed to have. Back-to-back losses of the Dragons and Raiders. Now we've got a trend, and there is officially a pretty substantial hole in the Sharks' top 4 canoe. Move on to the Eels and the Cowboys in the twilight game on Saturday, 32-30. The Eels hang on and give the Bulldogs a massive helping hand. It's one of the more entertaining games of the weekend. They both sides played with attacking intent in windows. Brian Kelly was enormous for the Eels. Around 240 running metres, 10 tackle breaks. Mitch Moses was his ever-influential self. Josh Addo-Carr threatened when he got opportunities. But North Queensland, well, they had their periods as well. The Cowboys worked their way in front 30-24 and looked like they might just escape. Then came one of the wildest plays of the round. Junior Polo threw an enormous cutout pass halfway across the field. Parramatta keep the football alive. Jordan Samrani finishes it, scores level at 30-all. Then a late penalty gives Mitch Moses the chance to put Parramatta ahead 32-30, while Scott Drinkwater's final 2-point field goal attempt is charged down and Parramatta hold on. It mounts the pressure on Todd Payton. Yes, his side are still in the finals race, but their biggest problem is their enormous gap between their ceiling and their floor. When they're good, they look like a legitimate finals side and someone that could challenge some of those sides around the fringe of the top four. When they're bad, they can concede 82 or shit the bed against Parramatta. Then they respond strongly against the Titans, only to turn around and lose this game to Parramatta. Keep talking about how talented the roster is, but games aren't played on paper. We keep seeing the bottom end of what they're capable of far too often, and to be fair, they're quite fortunate they're still in finals contention. With every one of these losses, more pressure inevitably builds around Todd Payten, and after they re-signed him earlier this year when they were in form and on a run, there must be some questions being asked. In terms of the judiciary out of this one, Hylam Lukey was sim in for a high shot. He faces a fine with an early plea, but risks suspension if he contests it. It's a huge win for Parramatta, an even bigger win for the Bulldogs, and a huge missed opportunity for North Queensland to really ensconce themselves into the top 8. Speaking of teams that, missed opportunities and took opportunities, it was someone inside the top 4 absolutely doing that when the Warriors went to Brisbane and blew the Broncos away 40-6. The nightmare season for the Broncos continues to get worse somehow. The Warriors led 20-0 at halftime. That became 36-0 before Brisbane could finally land a blow. The defending premiers have now lost 12 of their last 13, and it's absolutely diabolical what's happening there. And they now mathematically stand the chance of becoming the first major premier to become the wooden spoon of the season after. An extraordinary collapse. But the Warriors have barely missed a beat. They lost Luke Metcalf midway through the first half. Chanel Harris-Tavita just stepped up. Shans Nickel-Cookstar slipped into the halves, and the Warriors kept on rolling. They finished with 40 points. They're now level with Penrith on competition points and have closed the gap on points differential. They're right in the fight for a top 2 finish, and if the Roosters do slip on the way home, they've absolutely thrown their hat into the mix for the minor premiership race. On Luke Metcalf, he suffered another hamstring injury. He's not long back from one. We still need clarity on exactly how long he'll be out for, but with Tamari Martin also unavailable, the Warriors' halves depth is suddenly going to be tested. And then you've got the Brisbane injury. Reece Walsh, a high-grade syndesmosis. He's expected to require surgery. His NRL season is effectively over, and his World Cup hopes are now hanging by a thread. CNK will face 2 matches with an early plea for the hip drop, 3 if he unsuccessfully challenges it, and that's probably a fair result for all involved. Brisbane Premiership defence has turned into one of the worst horror shows in recent memory, but at the other end of the ladder, do not sleep on the Wars. They are officially part of this minor premiership conversation. We flip on to Sunday, and the Knights, well, they just keep finding a way. Despite a late Titans surge, they hang on to win by 10, 36-26. The Titans were feisty, but every time Newcastle looked ready for the game to open up, the Titans found a response and a way to dig back in. When the key moments arrived, Newcastle were far too strong. They were more composed, and again, they had to deal with adversity. Bradman Best withdrew pre-game with this ongoing calf issue. Dane Gagai then scored twice before leaving at halftime with a hamstring injury, which opened the door for a wonderful news story. 19-year-old Toby Winter, a Newcastle junior, makes his NRL debut. Another player who's come through the pathways from the Dudley Club this time. Speaking of players that have come through the pathway, Fletcher Sharp also got 2 tries. Greg Marzu got 2 tries as well. Kalen Ponga remained heavily involved, and Newcastle repeatedly punished Gold Coast ill discipline and errors. The only frustration was the finish. Newcastle led 36-14 before allowing 2 very late tries to make the scoreboard look considerably closer. In terms of injury watch, well, Dane Gagai's hamstring is going to require some further assessment, and we'll know more early this week. Bradman Best, well, he'll be a watch and wait on a game-by-game decision. But the Gold Coast, they lost Josh Patson to a head knock. In overall for this one, well, it wasn't perfect if you're a Knights fan. But at this stage of the season, with all the injuries, Newcastle don't need perfect. They just need competition points. And despite their building ridiculous injury toll, they've now firmed themselves up inside the top 6 and keep finding ways to get it done. We then go on to the Tigers and the Dragons. Look, it wasn't technically Spoon Bowl, but it was not technically Spoon Bowl. It was just Spoon Bowl. It was last year's Wooden Spooners up against the ones that have got one hand on it this year. And 2 weeks ago, that Wooden Spoon looked almost inevitably headed to the Dragons. Suddenly, the Dragons have won back-to-back games, and they've had to work hard. This one, Clint Gutherson, Dan Atkinson eventually found himself filling in at fullback. The Tigers score first, then St. George rattle off 3 unanswered tries, lead 18-6 at halftime. Became 24-12, and it looked like they might cruise home. Instead, things got very nervous. Tigers debutant Fijian Solomon Sakuru scored twice late and looked absolutely untouchable. Suddenly, the margin was just 2, and the Dragons had to hang on desperately, and they did. Well, that means the Wooden Spoon equation, well, they are still last, but they have an enormous task ahead. There are 3 games left. Winning 2 is probably the absolute minimum required to create a realistic chance of climbing off the bottom. Winning all 3 gives them a very clear path, and then it will come down to other results. What looked completely impossible a fortnight ago is at least now a conversation. Nobody at the Dragons is celebrating just yet, but back-to-back wins have certainly got to be feeling good in the camp. Giving them something they didn't have 2 weeks ago, hope. In terms of the big picture for the NRL, it's advantage Roosters in the minor premiership race. Penrith remain right there, but continue to feel the absence of Isaiah Yeo. They want to make sure they arrest this 2-game slump and get back in the winner's circle. The Warriors have officially forced their way to the top 2 conversation and remain alive for the first if the Roosters do stumble. The Dolphins are 4th after doing something historic at Brookvale. Cronulla have dropped consecutive games and slid outside the top 5, and they'll be looking over their shoulder at the teams behind them, especially with challenges with spine depth. Newcastle continue to overcome injuries and sit firmly inside the 6 and may just dare to dream of finishing higher. South Sydney took another massive step towards September. The Bulldogs remain alive thanks to Parramatta. The Cowboys' inconsistency is becoming impossible to ignore as they try and cling to a finals destiny. Manly are done, and somehow Brisbane's season keep finding new levels of pain. In terms of the NRLW, well, the Titans got another win that makes it 6 straight, and the Gold Coast, well, they're contenders and facing a huge South East Queensland clash next week. 6 consecutive victories. They break the club record they set last week, and they've climbed all the way to second. This wasn't a fluke. This wasn't a lucky escape. The Gold Coast dominated possession, repeatedly tore holes in the Dragons' defence. Leica Clark was outstanding, 180 metres running, 7 tackle breaks and a try. Georgia Hale again got through an enormous defensive workload. Tegan Levi produced another individually brilliant effort. This team is no longer simply hanging around the conversation. They are stamping themselves as a premiership contender. As I said, next week, Titans v Broncos, South East Queensland derby. The Gold Coast have won 6 straight. The Broncos have lost 2 in a row, potentially season-defining for both clubs. The NRLW premiership conversation is no longer a 2-team discussion. The Titans have said, we are here to be in this dance. Next up, the Eels 30, the Bulldogs 18. Finally, Parramatta were the final team in NRLW 2026 to break their duck. And this was by far their best performance of 2026. They flew out of the blocks, getting to a 24-0 lead. Rachel Pearson controlled the game well on her return. Elsie Albert punched through the middle as only she can. Rory Owen provided energy, and Abby Church, despite having some concerns over her fitness midweek, was enormous at the back. Canterbury did launch a second-half comeback. They got within 6. Then Church produced the killer blow with a length of the field try, finishing with more than 240 running metres. Another notable debut for the Eels in terms of story-wise, and former Wallaroos scrum half Lane Morgan finally makes her NRLW debut from the bench. A significant cross-code recruit, 37 tests for Australian Rugby Union. She did have to come back after some injury, which has been the delayed start to her season, but her debut did unfortunately end through an HIA early. In terms of judiciary, Tamika Jones faces a grade 2 dangerous contact charge for her hip drop tackle, which would 2 matches with an early plea, 3 if she challenges. Parramatta finally look like the side their roster suggested they might be. Win number 1 and a hefty blow land on their Western Sydney rivals, and maybe that'll be the momentum to start seeing them spark a couple more. We then head on to the grand final rematch. The Broncos 20, the Roosters 34. And I tell you what, the Broncos looked like they were going to do what many people had written them off from doing. They looked like they were going to beat the Roosters with a stunning 14-4 lead at half-time. For 35 minutes, it looked like the perfect response to last week's shock loss and poor performance against Canberra, but then the Roosters exploded. 6 tries in the second half. Bridie Parker completing a hat-trick. Jess Surgis got 2. Taryn Aitken and Surgis kept creating chances. Brisbane went from controlling the contest to being completely overwhelmed. The turning point was Brianna Clark's high shot on Jess Surgis. She goes to the sin bin. The Roosters immediately capitalised. By the time she returned, momentum had completely swung. The Roosters were on top and surging away. Clark now faced a grade 2 careless high tackle charge, which would be 2 matches with an early plea, 3 if unsuccessfully challenged. And that's with Ali Brigginshaw already out of action for 1 more week with her suspension. Brisbane's leadership, their middle depth, their spine talent is being tested enormously. The one thing is Brisbane do remain dangerous, but it's about that 70-minute effort. But they've now lost 2 straight. The Roosters remain unbeaten and sit clear atop the table. And next week, Brisbane get the hottest team in the competition outside the Roosters, the Gold Coast Titans. It does not get any easier. On Sunday in the NRLW, well, it was a golden opportunity let slip for the Knights as they try to hang on to finals football. They led this match for the best part of 60 minutes. They weren't at their best for all of that, but they took opportunities as Canberra completed poorly early and gave them sniffs to put the game away. The Knights couldn't do it. Then came the major turning point. Sydney Taylor was sin bin for a hip drop tackle on former Knight Sheridan Gallagher. Canberra finally capitalised. Mackenzie Wickie scored. Sophie Hollyman eventually getting 2. And Zahara Tamara kicked a late field goal to stretch it to 7. The Raiders win 25-18 1 week after beating Brisbane. Canberra back it up by knocking off one of those teams in the next tier in Newcastle. In In terms of judiciary wash, Sydney Taylor was placed on report for the hip drop tackle. We're waiting on formal match review committee findings. We'll wait for the official judiciary announcement. The takeaways, well, Canberra's late season run is starting to suddenly look very real after that mid-season slump. For Newcastle, this was a huge opportunity to strengthen their finals position, and they let it slip. And then we get to the West Tigers 30, beating the Warriors 22, and the fairy tale keeps on rolling. Last season, just one win, a wooden spoon. This season already 5 wins from 7, and they did it despite huge late changes. Kezzy Apps was out, Emily Bass was out, Salma Noor and Harmony Crichton were also late withdrawals. 2 players came in for NRLW debuts, including Leah Ollerton, yet the Tigers still jumped out to a 16-0 lead. The Warriors fought back brilliantly, and they levelled the game at 22-all. Then Lily Rogan produced a huge one-on-one steal. Faith Manera sliced through. Racine McGregor closed it out with a boot. And Caitlin Turnbull again produced another excellent all-round performance. The one thing for the Tigers, it doesn't have to be pretty. They've shown they know how to win ugly, and they just keep banking points. 12 months after the wooden spoon, they are staring straight at finals football and daring to dream. And last but not least, the Cowboys 30, the Sharks 18. North Queensland claim another scalp. Cronulla started strongly and scored the first try through Tiana Penatani-Gray. Then the Cowboys took over. 3 tries and a dominant spell gave them a control. Mackenzie Wheel scored twice and they led 16-10 at half-time. The Sharks refused to disappear. Miller Alaro's second try cut the margin back to 4, and you dared to think this was alive. Then came the pivotal moment. Jadika Tafua was sent to the sin bin for a tackle on Margot Vella. The Cowboys capitalised, and fittingly it was Vella that scored. Kayla Jackson later crossed on debut to seal a Cowboys 30-18 win and a blow in the Sharks' finals hopes. Speaking of blows to the Sharks' hopes, Georgia Hanaway left late with a knee injury. Jadika Tafua's incident is now pending formal review from the match review committee. So for now, it's a sin bin in a crucial match moment, and we'll wait and see what comes. For North Queensland, well, they continue to show plenty of fight late in the season. They've been getting grittier and grittier week in, week out. For the Sharks, another defeat has their campaign rapidly running out of road. They'll need to win almost everything from here. So it's advantage Roosters in the NRL. They beat Penrith in that final-style arm wrestle. The Panthers, though, remain dangerous. Do not write them off. And, of course, don't forget the Wars, even with Luke Metcalf out of action. The Dolphins, well, they're going to look to try and lock down that top 4 berth now. They're in their first finals foray. The Raiders punched another hole in Cronulla's top 4 hopes. South Sydney landed a huge blow on the Bulldogs, but Parramatta gave them a life raft. Newcastle just keep overcoming adversity, and the Dragons have somehow brought the wooden spoon race back to life. While Brisbane's horror season now includes a season-ending injury to Reece Walsh, and they'll be looking over their shoulder, waiting and watching that Dragons team coming behind. The NRLW, 6 straight wins in second place means the Titans are contenders. The Eels finally have something to celebrate. The Broncos have lost 2 in a row and are starting to see a little bit of a form slump. Canberra got back-to-back wins after the win over Brisbane with another one over Newcastle. And the Tigers' fairy tale run continues, while North Queensland found another impressive late-season win. So let us know below who wins the NRL minor premiership. Will it be the Roosters? Will it be the Panthers? Will it be the Warriors? Can Cronulla arrest their slide before their top 4 hopes disappear completely? Let us know below, and let us know who is in the mix for the NRLW for you alongside the Roosters. As always, subscribe to the channel. Make sure to hit the bell as well so you get all those notifications and don't miss any of our rugby league coverage. And a big thank you to you for tuning in. We can't wait to see you again. We'll be back on Tuesday for Team List Tuesday.